Jennifer and Patrick Pino are no strangers to us. We have had the privilege of partnering with them for a number of years. We're used to hearing them share about their life in Korea, what God has been doing in and through them in the school there in Daejeon. But God, in His grace and in His wisdom, redirected them and has had them serving in Ecuador at the Alliance Academy in Quito. And we are so excited for what God is doing. It's been a year of transition. You've prayed with them, you've encouraged them, and this morning, some of you during Sunday school got to hear from Jennifer, but this morning, God's servant is Patrick. He's going to come now and share with us what God's put on his heart. Patrick, you come and just share everything that's there. They got you.
Good morning. Before you leave, Sean, we have something to give to the church, and this is just a table runner from Ecuador that we brought back for you. You may use it how you wish to line a table, and just as a way to remember us and our ministry in Ecuador.
They're telling us to move over, Patrick.
Oh, all right. We'll move on. Well,
I'll let you know. They're going to tell you to stay between that speaker and that speaker.
Okay. I'll try to do that. I am a teacher, so I don't be surprised if I'm amongst you, because you're actually in a really good setting of tables and small groups, and that's what teachers do. So, I'll try my best to stay up here.
I'm going to go put this on the table right there.
All right.
Because communion is always available at the end of the
Perfect.
service.
Thank you very much. In your bulletins, you'll see the word next to my name, sermon. That actually makes me a little nervous. So in my mind and in my head, I'm not going to necessarily think of the idea of sermon, but more of a testimony, because this is what this is really about, is a testimony of God's faithfulness to our family and the work that He has allowed us to be a part of in Quito, Ecuador. I first want to just thank Pastor Sean and Deanna and Kim and others who have helped to organize this weekend. We had such a wonderful time yesterday, and I know our kids really enjoyed going to Defying Gravity. Apparently it's fairly new, that came to the city this year, and our kids really had a great time jumping. If you don't know anything about it, they're basically like, what do you call it? Trampolines, yeah, huge facility with lots of trampolines, and I tried it, and I'll tell you, this 40-year-old body needs to get into some shape, because my legs are feeling it this morning. At the end of our hour that we were there, our kids were kind of disappointed when they announced that we needed to leave, and Brady said, "Can we live here?" Sorry, Brady, I wish we could take this back to Ecuador. And then also last night we had a wonderful time of eating pancakes and enjoying a pancake dinner with many of you, and sharing a little bit more through some sort of a game. And just thank you, Sean, for being our puppet in a way, and thankfully, you can ask him about this later, but thankfully he did not fall into the volcano. So we, again, just appreciate you being willing to be a part of that. This is our sort of a new family picture that you'll see up on our screen. Just to introduce our children to those who do not know our kids. Well, first of all, my name is Patrick Pino, and my wife Jennifer, she's actually working with the kids in the educational building. We have 3 children. Our oldest, Zachary, was actually born here in North Carolina. He is 9 years old and will be entering into the 4th grade. Our daughter and our son, both, our youngest, Brady, were both born in Korea. Our daughter, Shelby Grace, will be entering in 1st grade, and Brady will be entering into pre-kindergarten, and I'll share a little bit about him and his experience last year, since he was not technically at the Alliance Academy International last year. Move to the next slide. As you remember from last summer, it was definitely an emotional time for our family. I remember very vividly for myself personally. I stood up here crying like a baby. Some of you probably remember that. It was an emotional time for us. And I distinctly remember going home that afternoon and thinking that that part of just that time when we were up here sharing, that was sort of a pinnacle point for me because I had held everything in all summer long. And I think for me, it was just the time that I just let it out. And it was the beginning of a healing process that we had to go through. You remember we had served in South Korea for the last 7 years. And under the circumstances that we were in, we were not able to stay in the country, nor at the school, Daejeon Christian International School. And our departure from South Korea was a very difficult time. Not just the physical leaving, but even just the transition of what would be next in our lives. And we knew at that point, we had shared with you that we would be going to the Alliance Academy International in Quito, Ecuador. But obviously we didn't know what life was going to be like for us. Again, our children had pretty much been raised in South Korea, and so their identity, if you would ask any of them, is, I am Korean. I am not a United States citizen. I'm not American by any means. They couldn't even identify the United States flag. Everywhere they saw a Korean flag, they knew exactly what it looked like. They could draw it for you. You asked them to draw a U.S. flag, they couldn't do it. I think they've learned how to do it nowadays. And so we said goodbye to Korea. And as difficult as that was, and just thinking back, we are very confident and we know exactly the Lord's plan for us then, even though we didn't, or we know the Lord's plan now, even though we didn't know it then. Moving on to the next slide. This was a verse that was given to us through this transition time from the book of James, chapter 1, verse 2 through 4, and I'll just read it. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking in nothing. This was a definite trial for us. Again, just under sort of the grief period that we were going through, and I will tell you personally, it was a time of grieving. And it didn't just end at the end of summer once we arrived in Ecuador. It continued for the next probably 5 to 6 months. But this verse definitely was something we had to rely on, and to really consider it joy. Times like these are not happy times, and there's a big difference between happiness and pure joy. And so this is something that we had to really rely on, is Lord, help us to consider this time a time of joy for us. So we just again thank the Lord for his word. Next slide. The other verse that really spoke home to us, and maybe it didn't come until later in the summer. We had gone to a church last summer in Minnesota, and we had gone to visit some friends of ours. And during the service, the speaker had, the church had been doing a series on verses that sometimes people sort of take out of context and just use it as sort of a feel-good verse. And this verse was something that we had heard that Sunday. And again, I don't want to necessarily take it out of context, because I know Jeremiah was writing it, and the Lord was writing it to the Jews who had just been exiled into Babylon. But this was a promise that he had given to them. This is what the Lord says. When 70 years are completed for Babylon, I will come to take and fulfill my gracious promise to bring you back to this place. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. Then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. Again, the Jews were in exile. And throughout that time, God had a plan for them. And I knew for ourselves that He had a plan for us, even though we didn't understand it. They, I can guarantee you, did not understand that plan as well. But we also had to rely on the fact that what God did back then, His promise is no different than what He can do today. And when He has a plan, He has a plan. And if His plan is for you, you better listen. That is what I've learned. And so this verse spoke really strongly to both Jennifer and I throughout this period of grief. Next slide. And so what did that mean for us? We knew when we had gotten hired back in February, March of last year. So the idea of going to the Alliance Academy was not foreign to us even last summer as we were kind of going through this grieving period. But again, we didn't know what life would be like in Quito, Ecuador. Asia, South America, very different cultures. Boy, did we learn that right away. As you know, Jennifer did her student teaching 15 years ago at the Alliance Academy when it was still under the umbrella of the Christian Missionary Alliance. It no longer is, and I'll explain to you a little bit more about that as to why then we are having to do some fundraising and rely on faithful givers like yourself to help in that support. But the Alliance Academy International is where the Lord had opened the doors for us. We had looked at another school in Dalat in Malaysia, which we had gone during our time in Korea. We were able to travel some, and Malaysia is a place that we were able to travel to, and we got to visit Dalat. We thought that maybe that might be another possibility, but there were no doors open for both Jennifer and myself to have any positions there. And Quito Alliance, the Academy did. And so the Lord had brought us to the Alliance Academy. And so during this transition period time, obviously it was a very difficult time. If you want to go to the next slide. Again, living circumstances in Ecuador in some ways is different than in South Korea. We did live in somewhat of a metropolitan area in South Korea. But Quito is a bit bigger, and it's a lot more people. Upwards of about 2.5 million live in Quito or so. We came from a city of about 1.8 or so, so it's still a large city with lots of people. There you'll see a picture of Zachary pointing to our apartment complex. We actually arrived exactly 365 days ago today, August 2nd. Makes 1 year where we got picked up from the airport and literally got dropped off to our apartment and said, here you go. See you tomorrow if you would like to come to church. The church is right across the street. Here are your keys. Good luck. That's not what they said. But it was definitely a different, from that standpoint, it was somewhat different than our introduction to the country in South Korea, where pretty much every instruction you could be given was given to you. Not so here in Quito, Ecuador. There are a lot of questions that we had. How do we turn the water on? And how do we deal with gas tanks that we have? And things like that. Where do we go to eat breakfast in the morning when we wake up? Or how? Those questions were not necessarily answered, and so we woke up the next morning. We kind of just ventured on our own. And found a bakery, and we had breakfast at a bakery, knowing really no Spanish, but we knew how to point, and we had food in a basket, and we went to the counter, and they used US dollars, and so that was very easy for us. We didn't have to figure out, any exchange of money, and we had breakfast that morning. We did end up going to church that Sunday, and the church is literally right across the street from our apartment. There it is. Probably no farther than the educational building there. And so it did make it very convenient. At church, we actually got invited to go to a family's house that afternoon as a way to sort of welcome new staff and employees at the Alliance Academy. The English Fellowship Church has been a wonderful fit for our family. One of the things that we were worried about is church, specifically for our children. We had come from a church that met on our campus at Daejeon Christian International School, and it was done in English. And for the sake of easy transition, we did need to find, or wanted to find at least for the beginning part, up until obviously we learned a little more Spanish, to go into an English fellowship type of a church. This church has been around for about 80 years, started by a British missionary couple who served under the Christian Missionary Alliance. And they, again, had a vision to start an English fellowship church. And it still exists today. And I tell you, it's a really dynamic, fantastic Bible preaching church. We have probably about 200 members that come on a regular Sunday. Of course, because it's an international kind of church, we have missionaries, retired missionaries. We have business folks who work in Ecuador. We have Ecuadorian folks who want to be in a Christian or in a English type of service, who are still sort of learning English. And so we do have quite a few people that have come in, and it is a transient church. So just like our school, when you work in an international school, people come, people go on a regular basis. But we have really enjoyed attending this church and being involved in this church. And it's been great for our kids just to be able to be involved in a children's program of about 40 to 50 kids on a regular Sunday. So we just, again, thank the Lord for just being able to open up this church for us. You can go on to the next slide. Jennifer, more so than myself, tends to find things out of music, and she's more in tune with the messages, I guess, that come from music. And this is just another song, Blessed Be Your Name, and it's a very familiar tune. I know many of you or all of you know this song. And the part that I want to read to you is highlighted or bolded. Blessed be your name when I'm found in the desert place, though I walk through the wilderness. Blessed be your name. You give and you take away. You give and take away. My heart will choose to say, Lord, blessed be your name. As difficult as it was for us to leave South Korea and make the transition over to Ecuador, we know that sometimes God gives and God takes away. But He always has a plan, and His plan is perfect. And so although He had given us South Korea for a time, He also took it away and planted us in a different place and gave us another opportunity and another mission work and ministry in Quito. And so this is just another sort of song, a verse that has encouraged us, again, just to trust in the Lord that yes, He does give and He does take away, but we just need to continue to look to His promises and rely on Him for His faithfulness and His goodness to us. Psalm 126, verse 5 through 6 says, "And now, God, do it again. Bring rains to our drought-stricken lives. so that those who planted their crops in despair will shout hurrahs at the harvest. So those who went off with heavy hearts will come home laughing, with armloads of blessing. Next slide. Ama la vida. This phrase and that verse is really what turned it around for us. There are signs, as you can see on I guess your left. There are billboards. There are, I guess they're sort of statues that are all over this country that say Quito or Ecuador, ama la vida. Love life. It wasn't until about February, January, February, where we really took these words to heart. Again, even though we had been living in the country for about 4 or 5 years, we were still going through a grieving process. And as difficult as that transition was for us and our children who would cry themselves to sleep those first couple of months and say, I want to go back home, meaning Korea. I want to go back home. Why are we here? I don't want to be here. I don't like Ecuador. I don't like our school. Loving life is what we needed to do in the present. You know, for those months, we kept looking back and kept reliving the life we had in South Korea and trying to compare everything in Ecuador, the people, the food, the community of AAI, the language, just the overall culture, and trying to compare our life in South Korea to our life in Ecuador and not being satisfied with it. Because we had lived in South Korea for 7 years. It was a part of who we were. And we had not learned that this was the life the Lord had given to us. And we needed to live it. And we needed to love it to the best of our ability, to the best of what our hearts could give. And so again, I think it was finally sort of a light bulb moment for us. We love light bulb moments as teachers when kids finally get it. We finally got it. Ama la vida, love life. The Lord spoke to us, this is where you belong. I have given you an experience in South Korea. You lived it there. This is your life now. Forget what's behind. Press on towards what is ahead. There is a prize for you at the end, and I know He is not finished with us yet. But we understood this message to love life. Next slide. So just to kind of transition out of that transition in our lives, just wanted to share with you a little bit of the ministry that He's allowed us to be a part of. We had some wonderful teachers, caretakers for our children. On the left, you will see a wonderful lady by the name of Juliet. Juliet and her husband actually were caretakers for another family who worked at the Alliance Academy. They had 2 young children. And this was a very difficult sort of thing for us, not knowing really what to do for Brady. There were some options of maybe sending him to a daycare. Our school did not have a daycare on our campus like we did at TCIS. And so trying to figure out really what to do with Brady was a difficult thing. Do we send him to a daycare where no one speaks English? and we have difficulty in communicating with the teachers there. Do we try to find a nanny who may or again may not know English? And so we were able to get in contact with this family. Their names are, last names are Nortons, and again, they work at the school, and they were willing to sort of share this husband and wife team. And so Juliet became sort of the primary caretaker for Brady. And that was just a prayer answered. This lady she's just so sweet and wonderful, and did a great job with caring for Brady. Shelby Grace is kindergarten teacher. Actually, Miss Norton is actually the one on the right there. She's Filipino. So again, she had two sons that Juliet and her husband would care for. And Miss, I can't remember. Miss Kitos. She's from the United States. She's actually a graduate of the University of Florida. And so she was Shelby Grace's teacher. And then Miss Odgers was actually Zachary's third grade teacher. She is a home girl. She's right here from Raleigh, North Carolina. And we did not know that until the day before we left. And it just so happened that we learned it because we had asked the school, hey, if there anyone who is on our flight that is from this area flying out of Atlanta, and the person who sort of coordinates new faculty, she emailed and said, oh yeah, there's a girl that who's from Raleigh. Oh, that would have been nice to know back in February when all of this was being arranged. And with her being a third grade teacher like myself, would have been even much more beneficial had we known. We could have been planning all summer. Not that would have really happened, but just the idea of being able to do that. But she actually grew up about 10 minutes away, I think, in the Crabtree area. Went to school at Enloe, graduated, and went to ECU in Boone. And so anyway, it was really fun to be able to work with her this year. And again, she was assigned as Zachary's third grade teacher. They wouldn't put him with me, which makes sense. But I did get to teach Zachary a little bit. I taught science, and she taught social studies. And so we would kind of interchange both classes for science and social studies. So wonderful teachers for our children. Next slide. Along with that is just, again, trying to find and not necessarily replace the friends or the community of people that we had in South Korea, but, again, just living interculturally or cross-culturally, you become really good friends, especially when you work with them, you worship with them, you live in the same neighborhood within about, a radius of half a mile. You eat with them, you do everything with them. And so to sort of have that again, obviously you're always thinking, okay, who are you going to make connections with, and who are you going to connect well, who may you not connect well with. And so the Lord really gave us some wonderful people in our lives. These are just a few faces. The girl at the bottom, middle, her name is Laura Rofrio. In Spanish, you would say Laura. Miss Laura was actually the third grade teacher assistant, and she was a wonderful addition to our grade level. Everyone in the third grade sort of department was all brand new to either the school, or she was actually a first grade aide that moved up to third grade, and so made it for some challenges during the year. But next slide. And then these three families were probably and are probably the ones that have impacted our family the most in a positive way. The family on the left, Dave and Beth Saavedra, they have 4 young children about the same ages as our children. Luke, who is in the red shirt, the solid red shirt, he was actually in my class, so he was the same age as Zachary. And the first couple of weeks we were there, they hit it off quite well and have been friends ever since. Dave and Beth. Dave is actually Peruvian, or his father is Peruvian. He is a graduate of the Alliance Academy, and actually went to school with Ted Adams, which I know many of you know, Thais and Ted. They were schoolmates, not necessarily in the same class, but they knew each other. And they were sort of assigned to us as our big brother, big sister throughout last year when we got hired, and all of our questions would sort of go through them. And when we arrived, they kind of helped us to settle in a bit. And we just hit it off really well. And they've been just wonderful people to get to know and love dearly. The couple in the middle on the right, your right, they were very instrumental in helping us make the transition and purchasing our car. Purchasing cars in Ecuador, not quite the same as here in the United States. And of course, they're both Ecuadorian. They are fluent in Spanish, and we were not. And so just to have someone who was able to sort of deal with car lots and people in Spanish was definitely helpful. But the lady in the middle actually was, she's our ESL teacher for 4th through 6th grade, and she worked very closely with Jennifer and with the students that were assigned to them. And so the family at the top as well, we've connected with quite well. Phil and Ria Holcomb. Ria is from the Philippines. Phil, I believe, is from the northwest side of the United States. They've been there for about 4 years, 3-4 years. Phil is going to actually be Jennifer's partner as the special education teacher next year. He had been teaching 5th and 6th grade classes, but he's going to be moving on to special needs department. And again, they have 2 girls. Their oldest is, although 1 year younger than Shelby Grace, they have befriended each other. Sometimes they're friends, sometimes they're not. You know how that goes with 5-6-year-olds. But we've really made a great connection with their family as well. Next slide. And then these are just the kids. Kenneth, there with Brady, he was just one of the sons of that family who cared for Brady. And then there's Shelby Grace with Maya, and Zachary there with Luke, you saw in the red shirt. And that couple down low below on the slide before, the other boy up there next to Zachary is Daniel. That's also one of Zachary's friends as well, who is also in 3rd grade. And I had both of those 2 kids in my classroom. And then Shelby Grace with another friend of hers. So the Lord really definitely provided some people for us to just build a community with. Next slide. One of the things that we really enjoy is looking out our apartment window to the south and see Cotopaxi volcano, which was a part of our game yesterday. But that's a view that we get to see every day as long as it's a clear sky. And we have actually been to Cotopaxi when the Irvins came up for Christmas. We took them up there. Not a very pleasant day, I would say, and our kids, it was very cold, very cloudy, and our whole purpose was to maybe go see some snow. Well, we never got up that high enough because our kids just didn't want to get to the car and hike up to where the snow was because it was really frigid, and our kids I guess they forgot what it was like living in South Korea when it was that cold, and they just didn't want to do that. So, and then the other picture we can kind of see from another window. Behind those mountains is another volcano, Pinchincha. So we're living and surrounded by a lot of volcanoes, and that can be a beautiful thing. That can also potentially be not so beautiful if something were to ever happen. Both of these are active volcanoes, not necessarily currently active, but there is some activity going on. And there was actually some activity going on in Cotopaxi prior to us coming back to the United States, and I think there still is. So, but it is a beautiful country. Everywhere you drive, you go through different kind of terrain and mountains, and you could be in a desert area and all of a sudden lush green and just mountains, mountains, mountains everywhere. Next slide. One of the things that we started when we were in South Korea is we began a ministry to our singles. We realized as a family unit that it was a large step of faith for singles to move away from their homes by themselves and not necessarily have family with them. So one of the things that we wanted to do was to sort of become family for these singles. And so we continued this ministry even in Ecuador, and we call it Waffle Fest. And it's just a time that we gather some singles to our home, and Jennifer is a wonderful cook and a wonderful waffle maker, and so she makes waffles, and some folks bring toppings, or we provide it for them, and just a spread of all kinds of things. And you actually see a couple of familiar faces. Yes, they're not single, but Ted and Thais were able to visit Ecuador, and that's another story for probably another time, as to why they were even in Ecuador to start with. But they came to visit and were with us for about 5 days, and it was during that time we just had a Waffle Fest, and so with them being there, they got to enjoy their first Waffle Fest. Because they were married in Korea, they were not able to be a part of Waffle Fest because it was technically only for singles. So they really enjoyed being a part of and raved about it, and I guess told all the married people in South Korea, look at us, we got to join the Pinos Waffle Fest. So, you know, and so now we're getting emails back from all the people in Korea. What? Okay. So anyway, so this is just another ministry that we have for our singles. And unfortunately, there are a lot of ladies at our school who are single, not very many men. So we've actually this year opened it up to young couples without children, just to give me a little bit more testosterone in my home. Because the one single guy that is there has never come to a Waffle Fest. And so I said, Jennifer, we got to open up to a little bit more guys because there are a lot of ladies here that come to these things. So we've opened it up to some couples as well. Anyway, next slide. Again, our table is a big thing. One of the things that Jennifer said to me when we first got there is we need a large table, not just for us, but for the people that come into our home on a regular basis. And we love having people in our home. I know that definitely comes from the Irvin family, and Jennifer just opening up her doors. The Irvins haven't done that for many years. I know it's something that we want to be able to do is to open up our doors to people. And we've invited Mandy to come to our home every Monday. We call it Mandy Mondays. And we enjoy having her on a weekly basis, just fellowshipping with her and eating great food with her. And our kids really enjoy having Mandy Mondays. And they are sometimes confused when Mandy comes on a different day. And Brady will say, wait a minute, it's not Monday. No, Brady, but it's okay. Mandy can come on different days. That's fine. So, but anyway, we enjoy having people at our table. Next slide. Our apartment has also been just a wonderful place to be in. It's very large, very roomy. Korean homes are not necessarily the largest of space, and we were fortunate enough to be housed in an apartment that has 4 bedrooms and a very large living area. As you can see, we have had some events that have occurred in our home. We actually got to see Duke win the championship this year in real time. That never happened in Korea. But so we have invited some folks for that as well. Next slide. And then you've probably heard stories about the trouble that we had with our car. And again, the man before that you saw a picture of that helped us with sort of taking us from place to place, he really sacrificed. He's a pastor. He's actually a music minister at church. And he sacrificed many, many weekends to take us around, to look at different cars. One of the things that we really felt strongly that we desired was to have a vehicle not only for our family, a vehicle that not only fit the 5 of us, but that would fit more in case, they needed to go somewhere, go shopping or buy groceries or do some sightseeing or things like that. And so we wanted to open up, again, just the idea that our car was not just for us but for others as well. It's something that we had the privilege of doing when we were in South Korea. We had a large van. Vans are really hard to come by in Ecuador for some reason. And although we were looking for a van, we settled on this large SUV. And cars in Ecuador are not cheap. They don't lose their value. The import taxes on these vehicles are quite astronomically large, but the Lord provided. One of the things that we were blessed with was to be able to have a financial sort of a cushion coming from Ecuador, or coming from South Korea, to be able to purchase this car right off. And so the Lord provided, but again, there were problems with this car from the get-go, and you just never know in Ecuador. Some cars may be sold and they tell you everything about it. Some cars may not be sold, or may be sold and they don't tell you everything about it. And you take it into a car, or this is a Nissan, so we had taken our car to Nissan, and they may again fix just the symptoms, and then problems occur later, which is what happened to us, before they tell you the truth of what really is the problem. And I know you folks had, many of you had helped to sort of support us in being able to get those fixes done, so we do appreciate that. Next slide. One of the things that Jennifer and I were able to be a part of is what's called Awana Clubs. I know they have that here. Awana is a big program for our elementary students. One of the things that Jennifer and I were responsible for, amongst some other faculty and staff, was to help with our teenagers. Our high school students are required to be a part of service projects. Some clubs may go out to the poorest of neighborhoods and minister there. Some students, again, may be involved in a program like Awana's and help students, our elementary kids. There's our sort of soup-type kitchens that students are involved with as well. And Awana Clubs is something that these teenagers were a part of, but they also need adult sponsors. And so we helped to train these high school students to know how to work with our elementary students through Awanas. And so our kids were also involved in it as well. Next slide. The next few slides are just some pictures of some of the kids' faces. This was Shelby Grace's kindergarten class. Next slide. Our first grade class. I think that's just one of our first grade classes. Just a little story about this young man in first grade, there on the bottom right in that blue shirt. This was one of Jennifer's students. He had some special needs, and first grade, learning how to read can be very daunting and challenging, and especially when English is not your first language. And then on top of that, having just extra need of help in academics. And at the beginning of the year, he was struggling to even read a word, and Jennifer and him were sitting down one day, and he had asked her, "Miss Peno, am I ever going to be able to read?" And of course, Jennifer would encourage him and say, "Yes, of course you will." And by the end of the year, they had done some assessments throughout the year, and by the end of the year, she had given a final reading assessment. And he was able to read. And I guess maybe, I don't know, throughout the year he just didn't realize it, that he was actually reading. He just was so happy. And he said, Mrs. Pino, I can read. Just to see that excitement from that little boy and just the work that Jennifer had done with him and other support teachers. Again, this is part of the reason of why we are there for these students and helping them to learn. Next slide. This is a second grade class. Next slide. This is both third grade classes, Miss Audrey's at the bottom and my class at the top. And just a few closer faces of students in my class. The boy at the top left, his name is Noah, and he suffers from Asperger's. We have a lot of students who are either autistic or has some form of autism. Asperger's is just another form of autism, and he was a joy to have in my class. The very beginning, obviously, was very challenging with not knowing how to deal with him and how to work with him. If you know anything about children with Asperger's, they have a very difficult time socializing. They have a very difficult time in recognizing certain cues. They may be brilliant, and they are probably one of the smartest kids, but you wouldn't necessarily know that in working with them unless you really worked with them. And you know, he would have a lot of outbursts when something happened. You know, they're very sensitive, and he was very sensitive to certain situations, and he would have these loud outbursts. And just again, to try to be able to calm him down and to give him strategies to be able to do it himself was a challenging thing. But he was just a wonderful student to work with. Jennifer also had a chance to work with him. This girl down in the bottom, her name is Ariana. During one of our chapels, our chaplain had asked teachers to lead chapels and to sort of speak in our chapel. And it's not something that was foreign to me because I had done that in South Korea, but also in South Korea, we also involved a lot of our kids to be, our students to be involved in the chapel, not just you as a teacher. And so we had an opportunity to be able to share Christ with these students. We also had, go back one, I'm sorry. This young girl, during our spiritual emphasis week, we had a group that came in to sort of do a week-long program for them, and they had focused on the Wordless Book. If you're not familiar with the Wordless Book, it's basically a way of presenting the gospel through colors, and each color represents something. And so the gospel was evident throughout that week in teaching these students. And, you know, you never know, really, what these kids truly understand and what they're gaining from unless you approach them with it or they approach you with something that they learned. And it was in about 3 weeks later after this program that we had where this girl came to me. We were in the middle of math, and the gospel had been shared with them. And I actually, after that week was done, that Friday, I had sat my students down and I had prayed with them. And I just wanted to make sure that they understood the opportunity of having Jesus in their lives. And so I invited them to do that. And I had asked them, I said, you know, I want you to share with me if this is something that you had done. I did not hear any response for 3 weeks. This girl comes to me in the middle of math again and says, Mr. Pino, can I talk to you? And so I said, sure, Ariana. So we went to the side, and she said, do you remember that day a couple weeks ago where you sat us down and you prayed with us and you wanted us to see if we would ask Jesus into our heart? She said, I did that. 3 weeks later. You never know how the Lord is working in some of these students' lives from time to time. And it was evident that the Lord had been working and had given her the courage to come to me, because I'm sure that was not an easy thing, but I'm glad she did and shared that with me. Next slide. And so this is just, again, me speaking during one of our chapels. Next slide. There's a 4th grade class, 5th grade class. And this young gentleman, Dylan, he is also one who suffers from Asperger's. And the 6th graders had been doing a project, a biography project. And of course, we all know biographies are about people. But one thing about children with Asperger's, they often fixate on certain things, and that fixation can last for months and months and months, sometimes even years. Well, this young man loved washing machines and could tell you everything about a washing machine. And if you were on the topic of a washing machine, he would go on and on and on and tell you about washing machines, because that's what he was fixated on. That's what he loved, he enjoyed. So instead of doing a biography on a person, the teachers, including Jennifer, as one of his special needs teacher, had allowed for him to do the biography of a washing machine. And I will tell you, he was very successful in this process. The research and all that, and the presentation obviously was difficult for students like him, but it was something that he knew a lot about and enjoyed. And so that was kind of the only way they could get him to complete the project, because he was so against doing it on a person. So they suggested that he do it on a washing machine. Next slide. So this is just the combination of both 6th grade classes. This is another girl that Jennifer had a chance to work with. Another one, again, that suffers with Asperger's. We do have a 6th grade graduation, and being able to kind of send them from middle school to high school. And this girl struggled and struggled and struggled the last 2 years in 4th grade and 5th grade. And I truly believe that it was only because of the support of the teachers and the attention that she received this year. One of the things that they ask students at graduation or prior to graduation is to volunteer, if there's anyone volunteering to do a solo. Again, this girl came up to her teacher and said, "I want to sing." This would never have happened 2 years ago. This normally wouldn't happen to a child suffering from Asperger's. And she had the courage to stand up on stage by herself. She's not even with the choir. She did have a girl accompany her on a guitar, but she sang in front of all the parents, all the students, by herself. And so again, just another success story of Jennifer's work with these students. So next slide. This is a very Ecclesiastes chapter 3. There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. We read this in Ecclesiastes. There's a time for this. There's a time for that. And again, just in closing, I want to just encourage you to remember that the Lord has, in His sovereignty and in His grace, a time for everything. And His plan is perfect. Next slide. We're going to skip this because of time. That was just a song. If you've not heard of a group called Ren Collective, I want to encourage you to put that as a part of your repertoire of music. There's a song called Joy. And again, just going back to a few slides before with the verse there, to consider it all joy. And it's just another song that was encouraging to us, and to be able to live with joy again. We do ask that you partner with us. it takes a lot of prayer warriors to, at least for us, to know that you are behind us, you are encouraging us, you are there with us. We do have a sign-up sheet in the back if you want to receive our newsletters. We can do that either via email, or if you don't have email and you need it to come to your home address, we would be more than happy to do that. Also, to give sacrificially. One of the things that we have not had the fortune of having is the financial security. We are having to fundraise because the Alliance Academy is no longer under the Great Commission umbrella of the Christian Missionary Alliance. They are an independent school. That transition was very difficult for the school 10 years ago when all the missionaries were pretty much from the CMA asked to leave, and the school did not want to close its doors, but what that required was that any faculty or staff or teacher there, they were now having to raise funds, and we had just only a handful of CMA missionaries who decided to remain. And we have actually one teacher by the name of Terry Lynn Cato. She's been there for I don't know how many years, but she was a faithful servant who said, I'm sticking it out and I'm going to be here till I die probably. And we had a couple that just left this past year, Bill and Ellen Evans, and they were also willing to be there. Ellen was actually Jennifer's student, or actually Jennifer's cooperative teacher 15 years ago, and they were still there. And one of the neat stories about them is, when they decided to leave, they were kind of sharing their thoughts with us. And, they had told Jennifer that it's kind of, for them, it kind of came around full circle. She had Jennifer as a student teacher, and it was sort of the end for them. And they said to Jennifer, it's just time for us to pass on the torch. That's a huge responsibility for us, but for them to be able to say that and say this ministry continues, but maybe in different hands. I'm not sure that we can replace Billy and Ellen because they've done wonderful things for the school. But again, we are having to raise a bit of our support, not full support. The school is only able to give us a sort of a stipend, and that stipend can only be used in the country. We are not allowed to use it out of country. There are a lot of things that we need to pay in physical cash, and we're not able to pay in physical cash because all they give us is just a card. And so all of the physical cash that we need have come from supporters like yourselves. So next slide. There's just some things that you can help to support us with. I'm not sure if you can see that from where you're sitting, but simple things like drinking water, school supplies. If and when we are here during the summers, again, we're not able to use any of the funds that the school gives us when we are in the summer. So our doctor bills, dental bills. Our kids took some lessons, music lessons, and we would love to continue with that with them next year, but that also requires us to have cash. We are also taking Spanish lessons, both Jennifer and I. But we are, again, all required to pay our tutor in cash. There are just some things that certain businesses, certain individuals are not able to give us this special receipt that we have to turn into the school in order for them to sort of debit it out of our account. And this special receipt can only be done by people that have an actual account. And so there are certain things like taxi drivers that don't have this. They can't just write out a receipt for you every time you ride a taxi. So they have parking attendants that you have to tip. And you can't just give them a quarter and expect them to give you this special receipt. And so it's simple things like that that require us to have to fundraise for. So please be in prayer for us and in our ministry. And we just appreciate the time that we've had to share with you this weekend. So I don't know if there's another next. Oh, and in the back there's also a form that you can fill out if you're committed to either pray or to give or a combination of both. So thank you very much.